So we're going to look at the pattern brush and the scatter brush in this video. Now here's some shapes that we looked at before. I'm going to ask these shapes to become a pattern brush. And the size that you physically make it on the artboard will affect the size and scale of the brush. So you might want to experiment with scale. Now I'm just going to accept this as it is and apply it. And you can see it does quite a nice job, but the overlapping doesn't quite cope. It's doing fine in the circle, but the rectangle is peculiar. You can always go back into a brush by double clicking, and then you could look at ways of fixing any problems that have occurred with your brush. So instead of the fit being stretched to fit, you might try adding space to fit and or creating an approximate path. And that one looks to me like it's giving me an adequate solution. Another really key thing that you need to notice, particularly with art brushes, pattern brushes and scatter brushes, is the colorization method. By default, it's going to be switched off, and that means that this brush will forever be the same color. So in this case, we have a black brush. If I try to make a complex brush, and here we've just got two circles with strokes, filled circles with strokes, and I can either drag that in or ask it to make me a pattern brush. If the colorization method is none, then when I apply that brush, and let's just tone down the stroke a little bit, it's large because the original circles were large. So here I've reduced it. Now, if I try and change the color, you'll see nothing happens. And when you're working with brushes, the color is always in the stroke. If I go back into this brush and change the colorization method, I'm going to change it to hue shift. Then you'll see that dependent on the color I picked here, we're transforming the overall color. Now, hue shift gives us the whole color. Tints and shades just applies a single color on top. If you actually look into the little light bulb there, you can get a graphic demonstration. So none will mean that if I've chosen yellow as the brush color and apply none to the stroke color, then we will get yellow regardless of what I try and do up here in the stroke color area. If I apply tints, it's going to apply a white, a kind of pastel-y version, a whitened version of the colors. And so any color I pick here, it will give an overall tint of that color. Tints and shades gives a bit more depth, but as you can see, it's going to give you the color that you picked will be the overriding color. In hue shift, you'll maintain variation in a complex brush like this one. So you'll maintain all the other colors, but the color you pick in the color picker will transform all the colors. So that's very, very important. The key color is the original color that you started with, usually. And something else to note is that you can see a description of what's going to happen when the corner of a path turns. So there's a guide about what's going to happen on this corner, on basic paths, and then in corners turning inward, and so on. Now, this has actually worked out quite well, and sometimes it won't work out well. Sometimes you will get some peculiar spacing. In the case of any weird misshapes, you can always try to add space to fit. That might solve your problem. And again, you could try using an approximate path. The other thing you can do is you can talk to this corner here and tell it how you would like it to reshape rather than deform. And then you also have control over spacing here. So I'm going to put in some spacing as well. So don't forget your colorization method. So now we come to the final brush, which is a scatter brush. And I want to use this more complex shape here. I'm just going to make a copy of it. Now, if I try to make a brush out of that, it's quite a large area. So I'm just going to make a fresh brush, make a scatter brush, and then I'm going to accept it for the moment. So scatter brushes go into the top area, and then if I take these shapes and try to apply it, you'll see it's enormous. So it might benefit me initially to reduce this, but you need to be very, very careful. If I want to maintain both these shapes, then when I reduce the scale of it, that I'm not losing the multicolored effect that I want. So make sure in your transform panel, window, transform, that scale, strokes and effects is ticked, and that will mean that the strokes will scale down effectively. Now you can either drag this in, or you can make a fresh scatter brush. And again, I'm not going to do anything to it at the moment, just going to accept it. And here it's created a slightly awkward fulfillment of the paths that I've created. Circle is fine, but the square is a little bit weird. So now if I go back into that brush, what I can see is the reality of the brush is everything is fixed. Nothing is moving in the scatter brush. Nothing is scattering. So if I wanted to manipulate this, I could manipulate, for instance, the spacing and create something that's going to work. And it could be, I could find something which looks very much like the pattern brush I made earlier. But the real reason for using a scatter brush is to control both the size and the spacing, but of course the scattering. Now, at the moment, with it fixed, you only have a size. But what I actually want to have is, if I'm going to scatter it, I want to tell it whether it's going to stay the same size or whether I'm going to have a minimum and a maximum size. So I'm going to ask it to be random size, and that will allow me to have a minimum size, and you can see some of them are reducing. And now I have access to the maximum size as well. So you can tell it where it's going to start and where it's going to finish. You also can add in spacing. So again, I'm going to ask it for a random solution, and you can decide on the minimum spacing and the maximum spacing, and it will randomly apply it in between all of the shapes. Now the final thing I'm going to deal with, because rotation means nothing here, these are all circles and it doesn't matter how I rotate them. If they were rectangles, then I might look at the rotation. So the final one is scattering, and I'm going to choose random again. all of these other things are related to additional tools that you have with something like a Wacom tablet, so that the scattering might be affected by the amount of pressure or what you dial into your stylus wheel or the tilt of the pen. And it really depends on the Wacom tablet that you have whether you could actually apply any of these. So I'm going to ask it for random, and then I'm going to decide on a minimum scattering and again a maximum scattering. So you need to, if you want it to be closer together, I'm going to pull these two together. We want them further apart. Let's pull them that way. Then I'm going to push this one further away. And you can see, rather than it be something to hog a shape, unless I want something close to a shape, it really is more like a brush. I'm going to leave them as they are. It's more like a brush that I might use to draw with, to create a scattering effect. So I can build that scattering effect up. Remember, you also have colorization. So at the moment, if I try to change this, it's still going to stay the same color. And it will only change if I ask it to change into one of the three other color effects. So I'm going to apply that. And you can see this tint will affect the kind of basic color, and hue will transform all of the colors. So I'll apply one color, but it will change them all. There's one final thing that you can do, and that is to make a brush out of a bitmap image. So I can bring in, this is a screen grab. The one thing you must do is you must embed. It won't allow you to do it until you embed. And then you can either drag it in, or you can create a pattern brush. So the only brush that you can make is a pattern brush. And again, you can give it a colorization method if you want to. So I'm going to say OK, and let's apply it to a rectangle. So now I need to think about the scale, my image, and how the corners are affected. So how do I want it to turn these corners? And you can see it's effectively creating a squished version, but it's done quite a nice job. And you can always go in and edit your brush to try to determine the solution that's going to work. So I'll add in a little bit of spacing, add in this, and that concludes the brushes.